Joe Hooker, who commanded the Army of the Potomac at the outset of the campaign, called himself Fighting Joe Hooker and was a fairly flamboyant, decisive, eager Union commander, and had risen through the ranks of field-grade officers on the basis of his enthusiasm and his fighting spirit. At Chancellorsville, however, Hooker got first confused, then injured by a spent cannonball and knocked silly to the point at which he should have relinquished command but did not, and allowed his army to be pretty badly mauled before he recovered himself and led a retreat back over the Rappahannock River. Hooker was discredited, and when Lee began to push his columns through Maryland, across the Potomac, and into southern Pennsylvania, and indeed they got, some elements of Lee's army actually got just across the river from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital. At this point, Lincoln lost patience with Hooker and realized the peril that his nation was in. And so the president replaced Hooker, and at this point replaced him with one of the few people that he could replace him with George G. Meade, who had been a corps commander. He was already with the Army, knew the Army, but Meade only had less than a week before he would plunge that army into a battle for its life. Meade had little more preparation than several days with which he used to acquaint himself with what the Army was like, and then try to find Lee and find out what the campaign's going to be like. So Meade deserves an incredible amount of credit for bringing his army to the battle, getting it together, and fighting the battle that he did. Before Jackson died, Lee's army had essentially two wings of roughly 30,000+ each, commanded by Longstreet and Stonewall Jackson. After Jackson's death, Lee suggested that they divide the army into thirds, make each of these thirds commanded by a lieutenant general, and be a corps of his army. And so this Trinitarian formula was Lee's answer of how to cope with the death of his most famous and renowned Lieutenant Jackson. He selected for command of these corps A.P. Hill, who had been a Sterling Division commander who had saved the day for Lee's army at Sharpstown or Antietam when he had arrived in time, just in time, to hold Lee's right against McClellan's army. At this point, Hill is very raw and very new to commanding so many men. And so Lee tries to use Hill sparingly and does not depend on Hill for the kind of action that Hill provided at Sharpstown or Antietam. The other corps commander was Richard Stoddard Ewell, upon whom Lee did depend. His decision on the first day at Gettysburg to stop in the town and not take Cemetery Hill or part of Cemetery Ridge, the commanding ground that overlooks the town of Gettysburg, essentially set the stage for the battle. It gave the North that decisive ground upon which to dig in and concentrate and all but dare the Confederates to come and attack them. And it all but dictated to Lee the necessity to attack if he wanted to try to have that decisive battle and have it here. Otherwise, he had to turn tail and go home. Gettysburg did not really happen because of a collection of shoes that were in the town. I mean, that was an incident that provoked a conflict between elements of the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac. What was important were the armies themselves. In order to win this war, one army had to destroy the other one. The goal of warfare is to destroy the enemy's will to resist, and obviously the best way to do that is to destroy the enemy's army. And that's why this war became what we can call total. That is, a war conducted not only against armies but also civilians.